Welcome back to the Root and Rise podcast. I'm your host, Brienne, and I am here with another special guest who has a powerful message to share with you. Today's message: overcoming the need to perform, healing your inner teenager, and finding ways to connect with yourself so you can find your value within. Before we officially meet our guest, Aly Pain, allow me to tell you a little bit about her first. Aly was raised by loving parents who came from trauma and repeated many patterns. She says she was an insecure, codependent, people-pleasing, promiscuous perfectionist, using food and sex for comfort and punishment. She started diet pills at 12, drinking at 13, skipping school at 15, and went from an award-winning athlete and straight A's to F's and failing out at 17, plus a suicide attempt. Aly only knew performing for love or fear of failure or punishment, and she believed she had no value, no voice. After decades of therapy, a couple of coaching certifications in relationships and life, and a truckload of tissues, Aly learned to set healthy boundaries and surround herself with those who see and believe the best in her. And that is exactly why she has been working with parents of teens for over 16 years to empower others to break the cycle and change generations, to help other teens from experiencing what she did, and for her own inner teenager. This episode isn't just relevant to those who have teenagers, because I certainly don't. It's relevant to anybody who was one, and who might be either meeting or healing their inner teenager. Because what I've found in reading about the work that Aly does with teenagers is that I still have a lot of work to do with my inner teenager. I hope you enjoy listening to this interview through that lens. If you happen to be a parent of teenagers, this one's just an added bonus for you. So, if you ever felt like the difficult teenager, mouthy, or maybe like you couldn't advocate for yourself as a teenager, or let's be real, maybe you still feel this way sometimes, this one's for you and your inner teenager, because they're still in there. I think you'll leave this episode feeling more in touch with your feelings, open to expressing them, and maybe even allowing a little bit more space in your life for your inner teenager to come out. If you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify, you'll be able to screenshot a couple of resources along the way. And if not, don't worry, I will have them linked in the episode description for you. Without further ado, let's dive right into the episode. Okay, so I am coming from a crazy day as well and trying to settle in. So I was just going to say, let's
just take a
couple
breath.
deep breaths.
I would have rather started my day with you because this
next
would have
time.
gotten me going. This would have, I was like, all day I'm like, but if you just do this, then you'll be done. You can, this was like the reward for getting all the other done.
Well, it's a reward for our listeners too, and they might be coming into this from a chaotic place too. So I always think just taking a moment to breathe and kind of be rooted in the present. That's an affirmation I've been using a lot, is I am rooted in this present moment.
I love that.
Okay, but enough about me. I have connected with you over feeling the need to perform, and it wasn't something that I had really put words to or given much attention, I guess, until I was reading your speaker application, and I was like, wow, I really have so many questions for myself, which made me have, in turn, a lot of questions for you.
For sure. Okay.
So I loved your story, and not in a love like, I'm so happy for you. I really resonated with it, and it really stood out to me. I just really felt drawn to how you felt and how you've overcome, and you just have a very, very powerful message, and I'm excited to be able to share that with others. Yeah,
Thank you so much.
And if there's anything we come across,
I cry, I say
okay.
anything, I'm unfiltered.
We love that.
And I think that's important when we talk about this stuff.
I definitely think so too. And I think that there's a lot of bravery in that. And so to be able to see that in other people is really inspiring, and reminds me that it's safe for me to do too. It's like a good model for others, which I absolutely love. So I'm really excited to talk about the need to perform with you. And I'm curious where it manifests in your life and how it shows up for you.
Oh, wow. How about where didn't it? That might be a shorter list.
Let's start there. Where did it not show up then?
Yeah, nowhere. Yeah, nowhere. Like nowhere. Nowhere at all. So performance was really a model of all previous parenting generations, and it started in the 1920s and it was disproven in the 60s, but it kept going. So basically, our parents were taught that you raised good human beings, which is compliant. They performed externally, and therefore you had more value as a parent, and therefore you were not shamed, a judge, and you were perfect. Like this whole perfect performance-y thing. Yes. And My parents were no different. They got the same book everybody else got. I was raised in a very, very strict authoritarian home, high intelligence. And so this was just the expectation that you are compliant and performing. So whether it's socially performing, as in when you bring a child to a social event, that child does not speak. That child sits with their hands folded. Like, do you get like the performance from that? It's all about what other people perceived. It's all about being pleasing to earn the approval of those around you, to be deemed as lovable and worthy as a human. So I learned it really early. And so it showed up, thankfully, in compliance, which was wonderful in school for masking ADHD. But I was also really smart. And so that kind of performing was the only thing, if anything, that got me any positive feedback. So I, got good grades, and I was like the good student. And then it came to sports, and I happened to be very athletic. And so I won everything. And so then I was performing there. And then like I would perform in front of family, and it was all just one effing giant performance. I was performing as a wife. I was performing as a mother. When I was a teenager, I was performing in sex. And yes, that just came out of my mouth, because it was all about performing and how I could be pleasing to others, because I had no other worth otherwise. That's how it was measured, didn't you know?
I feel that deep in my soul.
And I just caught myself doing it last week when I had guests in my house. And I found just recently a whole new level of calm and peace and authenticity. And I had guests in my home who I know and love for 24 years. And I caught myself, I got all off ground and out of sorts because I was going back to performing, because in our relationship dynamic, with these gorgeous people, I've been the fun friend. So I went right back to being the fun friend, and I got off ground, and it was a horrible week, and I got frustrated, and I had to just say to them, look, this isn't you. This is something I'm catching myself going back into. You have never asked me to. And I flipped back into it without realizing, because this not performing and not masking ADHD thing is still really fragile and new for me.
I mean, that makes sense. You've gone your whole life living a certain way and trying to align with a certain belief that you had for how you should be. And so it makes sense that it's uncomfortable to unwind that and just be.
Yeah. And I think the key is knowing that my value and worth does not come from earning, striving, and therefore is not hinged on how I can please others or they feel about me.
So what do you do in those moments? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. So this is partly having been raised with undiagnosed ADHD and in a home where emotions were very messy and unpredictable and scary. And so I never learned to emotionally regulate, which is challenging for an ADHD brain as it is. So for years, I've known I don't breathe. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I noticed it first in my late 20s when I would drive down the highway and like I wasn't breathing. And then for decades, I would leave the driveway and it would take me like 10 minutes of driving to catch my breath. Like, I'm like, what are you doing? I now, with the healing that I've done, I noticed this last week when my friends were, I noticed I wasn't breathing again. I was doing this really, really shallow breathing, which promotes and escalates emotional dysregulation. I get off ground. So for me, yoga is something that is really helpful for me, because when I'm performing, I am dissociated from my body. I'm not in my body. Whereas for yoga, because it's all balancy and hot and I'm trying to perform, which it took me a while to get over the performing just in yoga. But it is I know it sounds crazy, but it's everywhere. I've learned to connect with my body and breathe. And that kind of brings me down enough that I constantly say to myself, you're safe, we're safe, we're safe. And then I can be me, which with ADHD is I'm clumsy. My friends know everything I own, which is why this has green dots on it. It has green stains down the middle, and it's either from my morning smoothie or my matcha latte. Yesterday, I got beet juice all over. Like I'm clumsy and I'm forgetful, and I don't need to be afraid of those things putting me in a position of significant criticism, shame, or punishment anymore.
Was that uncomfortable to adjust to at first? Like, do you
Wildly.
find, yeah. And does it still take a moment to shift? I feel like I can relate to that. And when I start to relax into like who I truly am and just being authentic and not being concerned about outward appearances. It's very uncomfortable at first. I feel naked in front of people or incredibly vulnerable. Does that go away for you, or does that still kind of feel that way every time?
Yeah, it does go away because ultimately for me, it was exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
It was exhausting and felt so inauthentic that I loved the authentic, fun version of me. I just had a very prescriptive times and places where she was allowed out. And then she had to like zip up and be like, as much as that put together version of me got me really far, I didn't actually like that version of it. Didn't feel authentic. It felt stuffy and it felt, again, invalidating as I felt when I was a teen, that all parts of me were wrong unless I was performing. And so, yeah, it felt raw and vulnerable, but I'm going to tell you, it actually also felt exhilarating and alive. I felt alive because I was me. I was aligning. And so I felt alive.
I love that. That's really beautiful. And it just feels like living wholeheartedly, like being able to just fully be in it.
Oh, it's so freeing. It's so freeing and empowering. And it is scary. Like, yeah, it is vulnerable and scary for sure. I mean, I guess, especially on social media and all the rest. And I haven't perhaps done as good of a job there because I still do have a story that when I'm like fully unmasked and I'm me, then I'm not like professional, and then I'm not believable or like, yeah, professional, smart enough, or just all of I still have those stories. So yeah, it is still vulnerable. It just feels right. It doesn't mean it's not scary sometimes, but it feels right.
I understand the need to perform and how it comes out, especially as a speaker or on social media. But looking at your content, I was able to see authentically who you are and what you believe in and what your message is. So you are still intentionally being authentic, even if in the moment sometimes it doesn't feel like it.
Thank you.
Of course. I just want you to know how it's seen from the other side. That doesn't invalidate what you're experiencing, because if you feel like you need to work in those areas, I respect that, especially with social media. It's such a challenging and constantly evolving piece of our world that we don't even know how it's going to be impacting us because it hasn't even been around long enough to see, you have a free tool that I'm so grateful that you were willing to share it with my audience as well. I would love to hear more about your feeling wheel and how it can apply to your value, your voice, people pleasing, or how you just apply it to your world.
Oh, absolutely. So this is something that I would actually say is a cornerstone of my stand, my voice, my platform, is having, again, as many people listening have been raised in an authoritarian home, which generally speaking, that method of parenting, which was very pervasive for generations past, there's no room for emotions. In fact, the creator of that style of parenting made it very clear that emotions were dangerous and they needed to be shut down and ignored. This has been disproven since 1960, and yet here we are. And so I am constantly saying, no, like science has shown us that behavior is the outcome, but emotions are the source. So why are we trying to parent the outcome? It's like chasing the smoke, trying to put out a fire. You can chase the smoke all you want. You're never going to get to the fire, to the flame. So the source is the emotion. And then when Dr. Brené Brown released her book, Atlas of the Heart, and actually then Dr. Emily and Amelia Nagoski in their book, Burnout, and then also in their other work have proven that the science of emotions is that when we can effectively name emotions as age appropriate, okay, name emotions, only then can we articulate them, process them, and heal from them or release them. Okay. Not all emotions need healing from, but just release them. So if you think of it like a tube, right? So stimulus is happening all the time. Emotions are happening all the time. Emotional responses, physiological responses in the body. If we cannot name emotions, you just put a plug on your entire emotional experience, which we can also now prove is one of the core reasons that mental health challenges start. And I'm not talking about pathological mental health, okay? I'm talking about the mental health epidemic that we are in right now. So the tool that I use with every single family that I work with, it's not negotiable. It's called the feeling wheel. The feeling wheel itself was developed by Dr. Gloria Wilcox. I did not develop it.
If you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, you can actually take a screenshot of Dr. Gloria Wilcox's feeling wheel right now. And if not, don't worry, I have it linked in the episode description for you.
But I have 2 little short videos that I provide on why it's so important, the science and the research between why it's so important, and then a little demo of how to use it. Because what we can also show is that when I can articulate how I'm feeling, that's the beginning of asking for what I need. How am I supposed to ask for what I need if I don't know how I feel?
Mm-hmm.
So self-advocacy, which drives parents crazy because teenagers say, I don't know. That's all they say is, I don't know. And then it's so annoying. Well, they're not going to self-advocate if they don't know what they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't feel safe to share that with you.
Mm-hmm.
So the feeling wheel kind of wraps all of that up in one. And I am a zealot about it.
I am fully on board with this, and I'm so excited to link all of that. I'll include the books as well. We are a huge emotion family here, so I'm super excited. I'll print it off, hang it up on my fridge. We've got like a special emotion chart for my toddlers even.
Yes.
I love that. I had no
and
idea
I mean,
that was even
you.
what it was about.
Yeah, because and age appropriate is critical. For
Mhm.
children, there's roughly 6 to 8 emotions. When you get to older children, kind of into the tween stage, there's about 16.
Mhm.
And then no big deal. But in adolescence, they go from 16 to 87. But like no problem. It's just 4.5 times more. It's not like a big change or anything. Yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Once you start self-advocating, either for yourself or what you see with some of the families that you work for, what keeps a lot of people or yourself from using their voice to begin with? Like what factors play into that?
Well, I think that goes back to performance in a
Mhm.
way. If I am more concerned about avoiding criticism, shame, humiliation, judgment,
Mhm.
for fear of failure, particularly in a high performative, highly critical environment, then I am no way going to speak up.
Mhm.
It's not safe. And that was why I became such an excellent performer, is that it was a survival technique for me, because it
Mhm.
was the only thing that turned the volume down on some of my experience that I was receiving.
Mhm.
Survival. So finding my voice as a teenager, lacking emotional regulation from undiagnosed ADHD, and being extremely angry from feeling so oppressed. And I likely, my poor parents, I likely have rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So I don't take feedback, or like I get hurt, my feelings hurt a lot because I'm very emotionally sensitive. And also, just to make it interesting for them, I believe it's called PDA. It is pathological defiance of something. And so being told what to do, oh dear Lord, my poor so you package all that up in a body that was like, I had so much bigness, so much big high emotions, and I felt so oppressed and wronged. I spoke up. Didn't sound really great, but I spoke up. I mouthed off, I think would be the better way to say it. I mouthed off
Mhm.
to teachers, to parents, to I
Mhm.
was full of spice, like a 5 chili spice, like burn your eyebrows off. And it actually, it took me until my 20s to really learn how to package some of that into perhaps more receivable language. Now, a part of that fit my performance, because I'm like, okay, so I can put me into a performing package and I can talk my way out of a paper bag.
Mhm.
But it really did. I spent a decade in personal development and therapy, like
Mhm.
2 separate, like literally 20 years combined. And it was in those that I learned the tools that I didn't get when I was a teen, like the feeling wheel, like putting names to my emotions, like saying I instead of you, taking ownership, using accountability, self-advocacy, asking for what I needed. I wasn't great at that as a child because it wasn't modeled for me. What was modeled for me was command and demand. So I knew how to command and demand
Mhm.
in super saucy language and volume and tone, but it wasn't really effective. And so
Mhm.
unfortunately, I didn't learn a lot of that until in my 20s and early 30s.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense too, that once you would start using your voice, it kind of needs some time to be refined. Having so much bottled up, there's a lot of big feelings there that need to get out, and a lot of big thoughts and words that have been said in your brain probably over and over that needed to escape and didn't know, like you said, you didn't have it modeled to you. And I think that plays such a large role in how we cope moving forward, what was modeled to us.
Yeah, it was like learning a whole other way of being and living. And I remember, just to go back to this whole performance thing, I remember sitting in one of the first programs. I was 26, and they were talking about like personality and how we're all different. And, and I remember that being one of the very first times of my entire life to that moment thinking, maybe who I am is okay. I was 26.
How beautiful and also heartbreaking at the same time that you had to go that long, but also I'm glad that you got there.
Yeah.
Because you are worthy of that, and you are wonderful, and you have so much value to bring to the world. And
thank you.
Finding value in performing can be easy. And I mean, like, easy in the return and not necessarily easy in the work to put out, but being able to be authentically yourself is so much harder, but the reward is so much better.
It is work, because only recently, I'm just sharing this literally like, I don't know, like a month ago, did I realize that my extreme extroversion was another way of performing. I am an extrovert, but I am not the extrovert that I thought because extroversion was another way I was deflecting, that I was maintaining I could kind of control the narrative in the room because I was running it. I was the leader. I was either the leader or I wasn't in the room. I could like entertain. I'm serious. I could entertain people. I could be funny. I could make them laugh. So I could maintain an environment where I felt safe and loved all at the same time by extroverting.
That makes perfect sense.
I'm a work in progress.
But you are working, and that is what matters.
100%.
And I love just normalizing that it's not just a destination that you'll get to. You won't just be magically cured one day. Like, you are gaining all of these tools and coping skills and new language to take forward with you. So when these hard moments come up or these past beliefs start to kind of come back up, we have so much more to move forward faster and more efficiently and more smoothly, and hopefully less damaging to our world and relationships around us.
Yeah, 100%.
So with going away from performing, where you found so much value, where do you find your value now? Where do you turn to look for it or feel it, or however you experience that?
So again, partly ADHD and partly just humanity of being messy and not wanting to do the work. Like, I want to do the work, but I don't want to. I want the end. I want the reward. I don't want to have to do the work. So if you're, yeah, that's pretty normal, I think. It has taken me over the last, I'm going to say about 2 years, because it's when things were just getting so bad and so bad and so bad, not to mention, hot flashes and hormonal changes. For many women who flew under the radar like I did as a child and was undiagnosed with ADHD, because our brains are hormonal organs, it does get significantly worse through hormonal changes, which is why for many children, it also only shows up in the adolescent years, even though it was actually already there before. It shows up for a lot of kids more in their teen years than it did when they were a child, because it wasn't bad enough. And their whole perception of what it was, which is not really what it was, and the hyperactivity, which was a huge misnomer. Anyway, I'm learning to be a journaler. I hated journaling, hated it. It was boring and it was slow, and I hated anything that was boring and slow. And what I'm learning is to, number one, go to bed earlier. It's taken me a long time to I will not say master, but get the discipline, to learn the discipline to go to bed earlier. And when I say earlier, I mean at least an hour earlier, which felt ridiculous to me before. Journal. And sometimes it's just a recount of my day. And sometimes it's visioning, and sometimes it's other things. My brain, because I am full of emotions, so I have very heightened emotions, I'm very sensitive. And then childhood trauma on top of that is a level of anxiety where I tend to replay things. I fixate on conversations and what I should have said and feeling and how I'm feeling. And my brain's more like a bear trap on certain things. And I have a hard time letting go and releasing that. So journaling, I hate that this is true. I don't like when science is true when it comes to me. I like it when it's other people. But the journaling has been really, really powerful. So I journal for, I don't know, 10 to 20 minutes sometimes. And then I do my tapping. I do emotional freedom technique. Thankfully, it is free. You can even find it on YouTube. There's the tapping solution is an app that has a free portion and a paid portion. So I do some tapping. And those two things combined with going to bed earlier have helped me to be more rested. Now, when I am more rested, I am more emotionally regulated. When I'm more emotionally regulated, I eat better. I manage my time better. And so this has been a process. Like, I'd love to tell you it's like one thing, but if we haven't figured out yet, there's no quick pill. Well, voila, there's no quick pill. So then, and I'd been going to yoga, but yoga was like a love-hate thing because I'd get into yoga and it's difficult to explain, but I would literally go into almost a panic attack in yoga because my performance part couldn't figure out how to perform my way through it. Yet that same performance part was in terror. When I say that word, I want you to imagine like nightmare terror. My teeth were clenched. I was so on edge in yoga, like the Zen place of the world, because I didn't realize how dissociated I was. Because the only way to perform was to leave my body. And then my body was very criticized when I was young. And so I hated my body. So I just, like, as Glennon Doyle says, I like voted it off the island. So, eating disorder and all the things. So in yoga, I was in this terror place of meeting face to face with my performative me, who was just desperately trying to get it right, who was used to being so harshly shamed and criticized if she got it wrong. So then she's performing harder because she doesn't want to fail. And then, like, the weirdness of being in my body, and I would end up like in a sweaty mess at the end pretty much every time, like being snot crying on my bolster. And I chose to stop running from that pain. This is literally 6 months ago. Why do it earlier? And I have worked through a lot, not whole, but I have worked through a lot of that. And I am more connected to my body. I don't need to perform my way through yoga. I don't experience the same terror anymore. And so then, to bring it full circle, I'm not escaping anything. So I'm better at going to bed early. So I'm better at doing my journaling. So I'm better. Do you see how it goes around and around? Yeah. It's been big.
I'm proud of you for your yoga accomplishment. That is a lot to come over. I don't know if I'll include this. Maybe I will, but I've been actually doing yoga teacher training. And
wow.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. I have actually been experiencing something similar, not realizing I've always done one certain type of yoga. And so it was easy for me to like listen to podcasts or not really have to like focus on my body as much. And starting to do this training, I'm learning different types of yoga, and I'm starting to have to like feel the burn and like feel the different parts and really lean into it and then breathe into it and focus on it and relax it. And all of a sudden I'm like, I've never paid this much attention to my body, and it's uncomfortable. It's freeing, but also uncomfortable.
Yeah. I was only just using my body as a tool to earn love and approval. Like, I wasn't being in my body. I was just making sure I was doing everything perfectly. I don't know about you, but I was over here being perfect. So yeah.
Yeah. You are perfect just as you are.
Totally perfect.
We are perfectly imperfect. What other self-care practices do you turn to?
The consciousness of breath and breathing is really big. I have amazing friends. I have some of the best friends I've ever had in my life. That's self-care. Connection. We are not meant to do life alone. And connection, the science of connection and how healing it is really, really powerful. I have friends who are soft and gentle with my broken parts and know that they are my trusted people in my sacred space, and they love me there. And that is very, very healing, coming from so many unhealthy relationship coping techniques, relationships that I had set up based on constructs I thought were necessary and true and all of that. And just a daily awareness of believing that my pain can be used for a purpose, and that I say yes to the pain because the purpose gets bigger. And I say yes to the pain because the healing gets bigger too. Yeah. And my yoga, and you know what else I do this is my new self-care. I will not multitask. I realized how multitasking was keeping me in a constant state of emotional hijack, terror, performance, not breathing. It's probably the one single most dangerous place for me to go for coping. And now, and this is harder with ADHD, to just do one thing at a time or finish one thing. But I let myself, first of all, say to my little inner self, what is the next best step? And it can be, okay, I have an email that's done in 30 minutes and I'm starving. Okay, well, do we take 10 minutes to eat and then we do the email, and I just be with the question for a minute, what is the next best step? And I always have the answer if I'm just willing to ask. And then I do that one thing and I say to myself, as if I'm like holding this hair tie, I say to myself, one thing at a time, one thing at a time. And I have made like this tremendous, from not even realizing I was doing this literally like 2 months ago, to this flip that probably feels like one of the greatest self-care things that I do. Zero, I will not multitask.
That is beautiful. Boundaries are absolutely self-care.
They are,
Absolutely.
you bet.
And just again, self-awareness. You have so much self-awareness, and I commend you for that.
Thank you.
I heard a positive affirmation in there. And I know one of the questions I wanted to ask you too, if there are any positive affirmations that you say to yourself, either to strengthen your voice, your self-advocacy, people pleasing, or any of the trauma that can sneak its way up.
The biggest one I say the most often is I am safe. I am safe on my yoga mat. When I feel that terror coming back, I will talk to little me and say, you're safe. We are safe here. We're safe. So I say that a lot. Also knowing that my pain and my journey is for a purpose. And I don't say that like egotistically. I just choose to believe that, as opposed to wallowing in why me, poor me. It's the thing that keeps me out of that. And so my pain was for a purpose. I believe if I keep talking and I keep speaking up, that if one person, if I can be their survival guide and shorten their pain or expedite their healing, one moment, 1 hour, one day, that they feel less alone, then it's all been worth it.
You just did that for me, for what it's worth. We haven't even published this, but just today, I hope you know that you've done that for me. Feeling the need to perform, like it's healing me to talk about it, and it's healing me to hear you talk about it and your experience and what has helped you overcome. I've resonated with so much. I also love that you bring up healing your inner child and really talking to her. You work with teenagers a lot. And so something maybe in the last 6 months or so that I've really started leaning into is healing my inner teenager, which I didn't know she was there. She's loud, but I didn't know she was there.
Yes. Oh, they're rarely quiet. Rarely
Yes.
quiet.
Yes. And so it's now just kind of like a fun joke, but also serious in my house, that like when my inner teenager comes up, it's like, okay, we got to do some healing work. But I would love for you, working with teenagers so closely and parents, to know what you do when your inner teenager needs some attention or care or love or whatever it is that she needs.
Generally, the inner, which psychologically, by the way, we have, again, plenty of research that proves we all have an inner child and an inner adolescent. So just to validate what you're saying there, the inner child is a little more like, soft, like, come sit on my lap. Now, I don't want to be trite, because the inner child is also the tantrum thrower, because they don't have the context of life, just like a 4-year-old who's running around screaming in circles and is hurt and is mad, and that's all they know how to do is scream. The inner teenager is a little bolder, as you're saying, because they have a little more context of life. They have stronger words to put with, rather than a temper tantrum. They're going to fire verbal daggers. The inner teenager more easily feels oppressed and will snap back, like react in a stronger way. So I think for my inner teenager, it's like, stop being so practical. It's kind of the, what can I do that feels like, yes, I can. So sometimes it is staying up really late.
I love that.
And talking with my friend on the couch with like a very small glass of wine. I rarely drink, but with like a load of ice, and feeling like, well, look at me. Just like a teenager would, but doing it in like a way that is more constructive. That's how I let my leather jacket wearing, don't you touch me, step back, I'll tell you who I am, you don't know me. That's how I let her like come out.
I love that. I love that so much. And I love that you create space for her. I think that as women, we are taught too much to like dampen that part of us down and to quiet her and make her more appealing, like you've been discussing. And I think that holding on and acknowledging that part of us is what keeps us from being oppressed in all of those ways, like even beyond teenagers and their normal feelings of oppression. Like carrying that into adulthood is so beautiful. And I'm taking that little gem because it's going to be very helpful to me.
Your inner teenager is not here to be small and
Mm-hmm.
appropriate and dimmed down and fit in a box. Your inner teenager, inner adolescent is likely completely the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's cranking the music and you're just dancing up a storm, just anything that doesn't feel contained
Mm-hmm.
is what she loved.
Just like sitting on that for a minute. I'm already making plans for my inner teenager. She's like, come on, let's go. I want to stay up all
I
night
love
with Aly
it.
and drink wine. I don't even drink wine either, but I'll do it.
Right? We'll make some fancy drink that feels all
Right?
anything, whatever.
I know. Sit on the couch and stay up past bedtime.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. You've mentioned how you were raised, and you do a lot to talk with other families about doing things differently. I'm curious how you find compassion for your parents in passing along generational trauma.
You cannot fail at something for which you were never trained.
Mm-hmm. It's a
And
beautiful level of
parenting
compassion.
is one of the worst slaps in the face that is the most consequential job in our human race. So how do you get it wrong when you were never shown?
Mm-hmm.
Every parent is doing the absolute best that they can, given what they know. And so were my parents, and they both came from trauma too.
Mm-hmm.
I see them after years of therapy. I'm not angry. I don't hate them. I see them with love and compassion. And it doesn't make the way I was treated okay. It was not right.
Mm-hmm.
Did they do their best? Yes. And every parent is doing their best. Like I am no version of perfect. I am pig-headed enough to not settle for what I was told I should do, should be, and how it was going to roll out. And because I knew there was no way I was going to repeat what I received, but that doesn't mean I was born with a roadmap. And it doesn't mean that anybody that doesn't have one is less than. I believe that when we get relationships right at home, we will change the world.
Mm-hmm. The change begins at home. I completely believe that.
Right. And I don't say that out of shame. I say that again out of parents are not trained. And I'm just going to be the first to say, how's that working for us? It's not.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can have helped one parent to feel less alone, feel more calmer and more confident and good and authentic about the way that they're parenting,
Mm-hmm.
then I know that the teenager who I was is thanking me too, because that teenager isn't going to have to walk the path that I did.
Mm-hmm. And that is a really important part of healing trauma, I think, is turning
It
your
is.
pain into purpose. And you have to believe that. You have to believe it. I mean, what's the
Yeah.
alternative, And how much beauty can you pull out of pain? Like you are pulling so much beauty out of pain. I picture you like a magician with your little hat, just like ribbon the like it's just all joy in there, and like nobody's the wiser that it's all coming from pain. And I think that it takes somebody who's been through it, somebody who has experienced it, who has seen how deeply failed they've been through the system, through how people are choosing to believe or see things, and to be able to provide those tools for the next to turn around, be brave enough, and to say, you do not have to do that. I will help you.
Mm-hmm.
That is beautiful. And it takes a lot of strength.
Thank you.
The second part of this conversation still surrounds the need to perform, but moves into eating disorders, how to support somebody with an eating disorder, and some insight for parents to hopefully decrease the chances of eating disorders appearing in their lives. I'm aware that this topic could be triggering to some, so that is why I've given the topic its own video. If you are interested in hearing more about healing your inner teenager, or if you are struggling to find value within yourself, still catching yourself performing, or with any other portion of your growth journey, then I want to hear from you. You can ask your own questions, suggest a topic for a future episode, or even apply to be a speaker by clicking the link in the episode description. You can find Aly on Instagram at Aly Pain, or directly on her website at alypain.com. And all of that information will be linked in the episode description for you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. It's always an honor to spend this time with you. I hope to hear from you, and I hope to see you in the next episode. I'll see you again soon.